I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
Spent that whole summer with me in my room watching movies every day.
I love the movies.
I love the movies.
I love the movies.
Welcome
The house.
Of 1,000 movies.
So, I don't know if everybody knows this, but I'm actually like a massive fan of creepy true crime documentaries, whether it be true crime or just really scary stuff, or like really weird cryptozoology things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster. I'm like super into all that stuff. And there are a lot of creepy documentaries out there, which personally I haven't talked about a ton in my content because a lot of them aren't available on physical media. Documentaries have very much taken over like the streaming world. That's where most people distribute their documentaries. But I've got a bunch for you today that I want to talk about. I'm going to do this as spoiler free as I can. I definitely won't give any of the like big giveaways away, but I do want to talk about each of these and give you a reason to watch them. They're across a bunch of different platforms and services. I'll talk about where they are, but I think you could have a really, really fun time with a bunch of these. Some of them are weird, creepy. Some of them are terrifying, scary, creepy. Some of them are just creepy because people do creepy things. But that's the episode today. Today, it's creepy documentaries. I'm your host, Jeff Rossio, and this is House of 1,000 Movies. So the one that I want to kick it off with today is one of the scariest movies that I've ever seen, hands down. Horror movie, fictional, non-fictional. This movie terrified me because I've had this happen to me. And the name of the movie is The Nightmare. Now, it came out in 2015. Right now, it is streaming, according to JustWatch.com. It is streaming on Prime Video. It's streaming on Roku, Tubi, Freevee, and AMC Plus. Now, if you don't know some of these streaming services, I'll talk about them a little bit, but Tubi is actually a really good free service. You're not going to get the highest quality, picture quality all the time, but they actually have a ton of movies, a ton of documentaries, a ton of horror stuff, a ton of really low budget, weird stuff too, but they're really great for documentaries. So Tubi, one place you can watch The Nightmare. But The Nightmare is all about sleep paralysis. Now, if you've never had sleep paralysis, let me give you a brief explanation of it, because it has happened to me, I believe, twice in my life, and I sincerely hope it never happens again. So sleep paralysis is basically this kind of semi-awake state that you can fall into when you get into a really deep sleep. And the documentary does a much better job explaining it than I will. They dive into like doctors talk about it and things like that. People, who are experts on this. But essentially you wake up and your brain and mind is awake, but your body is still asleep. So picture it's kind of like if you had, if you went in for surgery and you got anesthesia and then you woke up. And you knew what was going on, you saw everything that was going on, but you could not move your body. It's a terrifying experience. So that's what happens with sleep paralysis. But the other very strange thing that they talk about in this documentary, and what the documentary is all about, is that people tend to have this shared experience when they get sleep paralysis of this black man, all black, just like a shadow figure, no face, no nothing, just complete blackness, usually wearing a hat, who will be in your room, standing in front of the closet, standing at the foot of your bed, standing next to you, looking over you, on top of you on the bed, and in some cases reaching for you and trying to hurt you. So this is real stuff because I've had this happen. And it happened only one time did I get the black figure, the shadow figure, and it did not have a hat on, but I was laying in the bed, frozen, and this thing was looking over me. It started walking towards me, looming kind of over me on top of the bed, and it reached out to grab me. And that's when I woke up. When it reached out to grab me, I physically like punched the air, kicked the air, like went into self-defense mode and woke up, like jumped out of my sleep. and it was crazy. I've only had the sleep paralysis like one more time, and it was just kind of like a weird, like semi-awake thing. And then I kind of quickly snapped out of it. I've only ever had that happen once, but there are people that have this happen every night, multiple times a week. And that's what The Nightmare is all about. It's a really cool documentary because it dives into the science of all of that and sleep paralysis and why it happens. But they also have these terrifying reenactments of what people have said has happened to them. In those parts are straight out of a horror movie. Some of the most terrifying things that I've seen on screen, I think scarier for somebody like me who's had this happen. I can't imagine how scary this is for somebody who has this multiple times a week. Although I guess at a certain point, at least you know what's going on. I did not, but it's very, very scary. It's a really creepy watch. And I remember the first time I went to watch it, I actually shut it off like 5 to 10 minutes in because I was freaking myself out. I was like, if I watch this, I'm going to get sleep paralysis. I'm going to be all messed up. I can't watch this. And eventually I did get through the whole thing and didn't have any issues, but it's terrifying. I'm telling you right now, if you're scared of this kind of thing, The Nightmare will literally give you nightmares. And so if you're looking for something super creepy, that's probably the straight up scariest one on the list. One of the scariest movies I've seen, like I said, but definitely one of the scariest, like pure horror documentaries that I'm going to talk about today. So The Nightmare, it's on Prime Video, Roku, AMC Plus, Tubi, Freevee. Highly, highly recommend it, but just be prepared because you're going to go on a wild trip. Now, the next one I want to talk about is called The Imposter. And right now, The Imposter, it's streaming all over the place. You got it on Peacock, Roku, Tubi, Canopy, another great free service. If you have a library card, you can get on Canopy and access a bunch of free movies streaming. Pluto TV, another great free streaming service. Plex, Freevee, and actually on Shout Factory TV as well. They have their own streaming service. So this one's pretty widely available, although where I saw it was on Netflix. Netflix used to have a lot more documentaries than they have now. Now I feel like they only have their Netflix originals, and they've gotten rid of a lot of great documentaries that were originally on Netflix. But The Imposter is a wild true crime thriller, all based on a true story. And the real people who were involved in this story are interviewed in the documentary, and there are reenactments throughout. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. It's pretty significant length for a documentary, but it's terrifying because it's a really sad story, basically about a family that lost a child. Well, we can assume that the child may have died, right? But or was killed, I should say. But basically, they had a child kidnapped. They had a child taken from them. Child disappeared, missing child, and all they've ever wanted is to find this kid. And they've held out hope. You know, a body was never found. They've held out hope. He's out there somewhere. Someone kidnapped him. He is somewhere, and news comes out through to France that they've found him. They found the kid. He's obviously much older now, but he showed up at a police station looking totally disheveled and was claiming, "Hey, I am this kid. I need to get back to America. You know, I've been kidnapped. I lost my family. Here's who I am." He had all the details about the case. And as you can imagine from the title, he may not actually be who he says he is. And that's clear, right? I'm not giving any spoilers away here. That's what the title is, The Imposter. But the craziest part about this one is the way that the family reacts, and watching the family dynamic here after they've had this missing child. They've been told that the child has been found, and they just so badly want to believe that. And that's like it's really sad, but also extremely creepy because you potentially have this person who, and throughout it's kind of like, is he an imposter? So I won't give anything away because it's very interesting, but is he an imposter? Is he not? Some people think he is, the family doesn't, but then the family comes around and maybe changes their minds, and there's twists and there's turns. And is this person just taking advantage of a poor family? But also, how did this person know all the details about this case? Why he knew things that only the kid would know? And so it goes on all kinds of twists and turns, a very intense thriller. And I'll leave the ending, out here. But if you're interested in that, it's really good. It has, creepy characters on both sides, both from the family and from, over in France and this person who claims to be the kid. And there's such a time difference that it really is impossible to tell. Like the child was taken when he was very young, and now you've got this, potentially, teenage person who you're just looking at and going, I guess this could be him. And, they've got to do DNA tests and all this stuff. And then it unravels into even a larger story than what's kind of on the surface. And it's a great, great film. Like, it's really well produced and really well put together. Bart Layton was the director on that one. And it is from the team that produced Man on Wire, which is a great documentary, not creepy, but a great documentary if you've ever seen it. But it's really well put together. I mean, it plays like a feature film, but it's a true story, which, that's some of the craziest, right? The true stories, especially even the the fictional feature films that are, based on true stories or whatever, crazy stuff. But this is true story with the true people, but it literally plays like some sort of David Fincher high intensity thriller. And that's why I loved it. Like, you can watch this and you're not kind of slogging through a documentary. It moves very, very fast paced, and there's twists and there's turns, and you never know what's coming next. So I highly recommend The Imposter. It came out in 2012. So there are other movies called The Imposter. Make sure you watch the documentary from 2012. I don't know if it was ever remade as a fictional, but documentary is 2012. And again, it's on Peacock, Roku, Tubi, Canopy, Pluto, Shout TV, Plex. It's all over the place. So go check it out. Now, the next one I want to talk about is also about a missing child, but this one somehow might be weirder than The Imposter. And the name of this documentary is Who Took Johnny? Now, I originally watched this on Netflix, and it was very popular on Netflix. I saw it circling around like Reddit threads and a few other places. I don't think it gets talked about nearly as much as some other big documentaries. And it's really hard to find now. According to justwatch.com, it's only available on Canopy, although I've heard some people have had a hard time getting it there. And so it's kind of strangely unavailable for a fairly popular documentary when it came out in 2014. It was on Netflix. It got a ton of views. And the reason I say it's kind of strangely unavailable is because of the story it tells. And, the mild conspiracy theorist in me says maybe there's a reason why this documentary is not easy to find, because maybe certain people don't want it to be found. So Who Took Johnny is all about Johnny Ghosh. I forget how they say his name, but he was a kid out of Iowa, paper boy, who was doing his route one morning, doing his paper route. I believe he was like 12, 13 when it happened. But he's doing his paper route and he never comes home. So back in this time, this is back in like the 80s, I believe, early 80s. I may have my timing a little bit off there, but basically it's set in a time period, not set. I mean, it happened in a time period where if you had a missing kid, was it immediate panic? No. Like, he was doing his paper route. Maybe he went off and played with the kids. And, so hours pass and eventually he doesn't come home. Eventually they find his bike. They find some of the papers. He's gone. And that's how the documentary kicks off. And he's not the first child who's gone missing in that area. So there's suspicion already about, is there something bigger at play here? Do we have a serial child murderer? What's going on? And the parents are obviously trying to figure it out. They go on a pretty big campaign to try to find their son. Their mother and father take it very seriously. The mother, for sure goes very hard on this case. And Johnny ends up being the first kid ever on a milk carton. So that kind of classic, the missing kids in the milk carton. Johnny was the first one ever. Now, it's all kind of straightforward up to that point. Sad, but straightforward. It's, true crime documentary. We've seen this before. And then you start to put some dots together and they start to make some connections. And Johnny's mother, Noreen, dives deep into this, getting private investigators, talking to people. And the gist of it is, without giving anything away, is that Johnny, his disappearance and his kidnapping, it may have been a part of something much bigger. It may have been a part of something that involves powerful people and children and human trafficking and a lot of really crazy, what most people would have said back then were conspiracy theories. But, as things come out about people like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and everything that's kind of happening there, you start to connect some dots and you start to say, okay, this isn't maybe as far-fetched as some people thought the mother was being back then. And so it kind of takes you through that story, it takes you through her journey, trying to figure out what's going on. Insane twists and turns along the way, things that will literally leave you like with your jaw on the floor, but also very interesting because it's like, who do you trust? Are we trusting the police in this situation who, probably didn't take this case super seriously given the time period and everything? Are we trusting the mother who's, obviously just trying to come up with anything that can explain where her son went, what happened to him? She obviously could make things up in her own head about, something that would make her feel better. Not necessarily better, but would make her feel like she at least has answers, because right now, officially, legally, she has none, but she has her theories and she has her kind of, the conspiracies. And, there are a lot of things in this that will have you raising your eyebrows. Like, okay, that is legit and that really happened. And, and then they start to make connections with other missing kids and some crazy, true news stories, things that happened in the 90s, in the 2000s that were, confirmed by some people, seemingly like pushed under the rug by others. It's a terrifying documentary if you have kids, because you just don't know. I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know what was true, what wasn't true. I mean, none of it to me personally, knowing what we know now, about what's been going on in different organizations. Hey, the Catholic Church, Boy Scouts, women's gymnastics, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. Like I said, I mean, this stuff is everywhere, right? And in that time period, you had these serial killers who were certainly active and potentially had strange connections, to rings like this. I mean, this stuff is all, these people were out there and they're still out there. And so that's what scares me the most about who took Johnny and some of the evidence that they bring forward. I guess you have to take everything with a grain of salt, but it's a great, great film. And, it's an hour and 20 minutes. It's a real nice, quick watch that will have you just totally in just inside of this story, just totally engulfed by what's happening in front of you on the screen. I love it. I think it's super important. I think more people should see it, and I think more people should question maybe what's happening there. But it also just, it's a really interesting look into the mindset of a mother who's lost a child, very much like The Imposter. This is a good companion piece to The Imposter in that way, the psyche of a family and a mother who had a child kidnapped, and what that does to a person is interesting from a psychological standpoint. But yeah, this is why I say the fact that it's only streaming, just watch, checks 264 different streaming services. So it's on one service, and potentially, from what I've heard, this is out of date and it's not even on Canopy anymore. Um, why isn't it available? Why is this we talked about these other documentaries that I mentioned already, how many different services they're on. Why is this one not? Interesting, right? But who took Johnny? If you can find a way to watch it, I'm sure there are copies floating around out there online. I don't know that it has like a DVD release or anything, but it may be available on YouTube. There may be rips out there. I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it to check it out. It is a super, super interesting documentary. Just as long as you have enough like media literacy to not go down the rabbit hole and go full like QAnon conspiracy theorist on this, and you can take everything with a grain of salt. There's some really interesting stuff that happens that I think like the internal kind of detective investigator and all of us who love this stuff will find very, very interesting. Moving on now to the next one. I promise, I'm looking at my list. This is the last one about children, abducted children and things like that. But this one's different. This one's a little bit different. And this is, I will say, one of the most shocking, jaw-dropping documentaries that I've ever watched. And it's called Abducted in Plain Sight. Now, this one right now is available on Netflix, which is great. It's still available on Netflix. It is on Canopy, that streaming service, which you can get with a library card, and it's on Pluto TV. So you've got a couple options. Pluto TV with ads, you can watch that totally free. Canopy is also free without ads if you have your library card. I'm telling you, Canopy is a great service to check out for documentaries. But I watched Abducted in Plain Sight on Netflix. And, going into it, I went in blind. And if you want to go into it blind, stop here, because I am going to talk about it a little bit. Stop here, fast forward, I'll tell you when it ends. But Abducted in Plain Sight has what I would say are the two worst parents in film history, fictional or non-fictional, documentary, whatever. The two worst parents in film history, because the stuff that happens in this movie is, I honestly don't think, this is cliche, but I don't think somebody could write what happens in this film as a Hollywood script, because somebody would tell you that script was too ridiculous and too far removed from the truth, and something like that would never happen, which is cliche. I know people say that, but truly, I've never watched a documentary that I was like 100%, I can't believe this is real. Like, this can't be real. And the gist of the story is basically this. They've got, you've got these parents, they have a daughter, and they have this like neighborhood friend who is a family friend, is very close with the family, becomes very, very close with the daughter as well. And they kind of, it's again, the time period, they kind of think, nothing of it. It's, yeah, he's this older guy who kind of hangs around with their daughter, but they almost turn a blind eye to some of that. And of course, does this guy have the girl's best interests in mind? No. He's, this is why it's called Abducted in Plain Sight, without giving too much away. He is not a good guy, and he is doing things with this girl that I don't even want to get into on a podcast, but he's doing things here that are despicable, horrible, criminal, just monstrous stuff. And it's all happening, kind of in plain sight. And the parents are either turning a blind eye or letting it happen, to the point where, she's going on trips with this guy. He's spending time alone with her, and the parents are signing off on all of this. And that's the gist of it. And I don't want to go too much further into it, because that's just the surface level, right? Like, that's messed up enough. That's really messed up. Okay, just that concept. But it gets worse. Believe it or not, this is why I say Hollywood couldn't write this script, because it gets worse somehow. And then right when you think, okay, that's probably as bad as it can get, it actually gets even worse and more ridiculous. And I mean, I remember watching this. I watched it with my wife, and there's one moment in this where I didn't know I think I laughed out loud because I was just like, this is the most insane, unhinged, crazy thing that I have ever heard in a documentary. And it's not funny, but like I didn't know how to process it otherwise. It's a horrifying thing. It's nothing that actually happened to the girl. It's a horrifying, ridiculous thing that happened, which that is when I checked off the box of, okay, these are the worst parents maybe in the history of mankind. And it does feature some really interesting interviews with the girl from the movie. She is grown up now and is dealing with it, and she talks through a lot of what happened and the situations, which is extremely like brave of somebody who went through this to come out and deal with it heads on in a movie for everybody to see. But she does; she's a part of it, which is really cool. But it's best to go in with as little information as you can. So I'm not going to dive in too much more. But if you guys do watch this, send me an email and let me know what you thought, because I I haven't talked to enough people who have seen it. Um, I've talked to some people online who have seen it, but I haven't talked to enough people and I want to know what your immediate reaction is. If it's the same as mine, which is just like disbelief, jaw on the floor, laughing out loud. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, because you're going to come to that point in this documentary, and please tell me, because I'm very curious what you think. So again, Abducted in Plain Sight, that's available on Netflix, Canopy, and Pluto TV, and it is well worth your time. It's again a short one. That's why I love documentaries. Hour and 30 minutes. I would call that a date night movie, but this is not a date night movie unless you're like my wife and I, and we watch true crime stuff for a date night. So maybe you are that couple, but it's that nice short. You can fit it in after you put the kids to bed. You can get dinner and watch this thing. It's an hour and a half, but it's an absolute trip. Now, sticking with Netflix for this, this is a very recent one. This came out in 2024, but I hope everybody watches it because much like Abducted in Plain Sight, this one pretty much blew my mind completely. It is a series, technically, so not a movie, although it's short enough. It's only 3 episodes at 45 minutes apiece, so it's just over 2 hours in total length. You can definitely watch it all in one sitting. I actually would recommend that, doing it all in one sitting, because it's worth it. But American Nightmare, it's just on Netflix right now, and at least the first season, they may have other seasons, but season 1, which was 3 episodes, kind of like Abducted in Plain Sight. I don't know that. Well, I guess Hollywood has written scripts like this, but it's one of those it's too hard to believe. The whole story is too hard to believe. And I will fully admit, I don't want to give anything away again, but I'll tell you the gist of it is basically it opens up with this woman and her boyfriend, and they are woken up in the middle of the night, kidnapped. The woman is kidnapped and taken away. They're tied up, they're bound, they're blindfolded. The boyfriend passes out from some kind of chloroform or whatever. They have him passed out. They take the girl. She's gone. He wakes up hours later, calls the police and goes, "Hey, I've been robbed, beaten. Someone broke into our house. My girlfriend is missing. I don't know where she is." And immediately, as typically happens, all the fingers are pointing back. Boyfriend, what did you do? Why did you wait? This happened overnight and you waited all these hours. And he's got this story about men with masks and wearing scuba diver masks over their eyes, and with the chloroform and all the crazy things that they said and they did, and they said we're part of a gang and we're here to take your girl, and if everything works out, she'll be back, and all this stuff, and bananas stuff. Like you'd think the guy had watched a bad movie and made this all up to cover. And so that's where it kicks off, right? And from there, it takes a hard left turn, which if you're a film fan, you really appreciate. They reference heavily one movie in this that they kind of think inspired the guy, or inspired this whole case, and they dive deep into that, which is kind of cool if you like movies. Most of you will probably know this movie, very popular. I don't want to give it away. But then it takes a hard left, and then you think, oh, okay, I've got it. I know what happened. And then it takes a hard right turn, and then it takes another hard left turn and another hard right. And by the time you're done, I think you'll have gone back and forth. I flip-flopped like, this person did it. No, this person did it. No, it was probably this person. No, they're making the whole thing up. It's all a lie. No, the boyfriend did it and killed his girlfriend. The whole thing is so bizarre. And I hope you guys go and watch it. It's well worth it. 45 minutes, 3 episodes. This one I'm going to leave pretty open-ended. Don't want to talk about it anymore. Go check it out, though, because I honestly can't believe that it actually happened. It's that insane. It is the fact that it happened. What happened is what is so creepy and terrifying about this, because it could happen to anybody, and you never know. And that's why humans are the scariest monsters in all of movies. I've talked about this, and I will talk about it on the podcast. The scariest monster you can put in a movie is an unhinged person, because humans are terrifying. Now, the next one I want to share with you is it's called Tickled, and everybody laughs at me when I recommend this movie. And I've tried to explain it to people in person. People have said, oh, I want to watch a documentary. What's a good one to watch? And I've said Tickled. It's a documentary about people who like to be tickled and record videos of themselves being tickled to post online for other tickle enthusiasts, right? Hey, everybody's got their community, right? Everybody's got their thing. And this is a real thing. People are being tickled. They're being like tied down, tickled, recorded, and those videos are sold. And nothing is they're not nude. There's nothing sexual about it. They're just there being tickled, and that's what's being recorded. So the guy who did this, his name is David Farrier, and that's where he starts, as he sees one of these videos or something, or sees I think maybe he goes to a convention and somebody is there, and he starts and he's fascinated. Now, David Farrier also has a great show on Netflix called Dark Tourist. If you've never seen Dark Tourist, that's also a really cool, essentially what it is he goes to different countries and kind of dives into really creepy parts of their tourism, like the Day of the Dead in Mexico, for example. Dives into kind of creepy things. Dark tourism being like, I think he goes to Chernobyl in one episode. Like, he goes to these places that are kind of dark, creepy, macabre, and explores them. And it's a great show, and I wish he had made a second season. But Tickled is his full-length documentary, hour and a half. You can watch it right now. It's on Fubo TV, which is a subscription like cable alternative. I actually use it. Hoopla, which is another minor streaming service, but it is also on Vudu for free. It's on Pluto TV for free with ads, and it is on Plex. So you do have some options. Pluto TV, again, a great place to get tons of free content like this. But David Farrier, right? So he goes into this world of tickling, and you're laughing, right? Obviously it's funny. It's people being tickled, and you're like, this is bizarre, but hey, what's the rule? I'm going to get it wrong. It's always on Reddit. Rule 37 or something. Like, there's going to be weird stuff about anything. If there's a cartoon or something that's popular, there's going to be people who fetishize it, right? So tickling is the same thing. And it takes some turns that you definitely won't expect. Common theme with these documentaries, but the creepy part of it is the rabbit hole that Farrier goes down. I don't think anybody will be ready for where this takes you, how deep it goes. It reminds me of Who Took Johnny in a way. It's not maybe as serious as Who Took Johnny in terms of like the crimes being committed, but there is some stuff going on that Farrier starts to unravel and really does some incredible investigative research and journalism and puts together this amazing documentary. But as the things start to unravel, you start to see the layers of this, and you start to understand, oh, okay, this is even weirder than we thought. This is even stranger than we thought. This goes deeper than we thought. And there may be something nefarious behind this, although it all seemed at the surface level, just, people with a thing for tickling. It gets a little bit darker than that. And I do think some of what he uncovers will blow your mind and definitely leave you questioning. And then also, definitely feeling a different way than you felt in the first, say, 20, 25 minutes when he's exploring this world. It starts off as this very like funny, kind of cutesy documentary about, this weird thing people do on the internet. And by the end of it, I think you'll feel very differently about the first 20 minutes if you rewatch it. It is, it's one of those documentaries that you just kind of have to see to believe. I know. Trust me, I've told people this sounds ridiculous. A documentary about tickling people tickling other people. That's the big true crime, investigative, creepy story, which sounds ridiculous, well aware. But trust me on it. Please watch it and watch everything David Farrier does. I think he's amazing. And I hope he does more content like this. He's kind of been, I believe he's been out of the game for a little bit when it comes to like the like movies and TV shows stuff. But Dark Taurus came out 2 years afterward in 2018. It's really good. Tickled was 2016. It looks like he did a movie called Mr. Organ in 2022. Well, now I'm going to have to watch this. I did not realize this. David Farrier has a new documentary called Mr. Organ about, see, I love this guy's stuff. A game of cat and mouse with a mysterious individual. Count me in. Put that in your list, Mr. Oregon. But Tickled, watch Tickled first, then go watch Dark Taurus. And if you enjoy them and you enjoy Farrier, he's from New Zealand, very dry sense of humor, but also willing to throw himself into literally any situation, almost at like a Nathan Fielder, Nathan For You type level. But like he's really doing it in the real world, not playing a character. It's incredible. Well worth your time. All right, then to round things out here, I've got a double feature for you. We've got Cropsy and Killer Legends, which is the rare documentary series sequel feature films. Now, another one that is like that gets an honorable mention is The Act of Killing and The Act of Silence. Those are two of the darkest, most disturbing things I've ever seen. It's about the Cambodian genocide, the Khmer Rouge. It's horrible. The things that are reenacted in that documentary, you can truly see where sometimes humanity has just lost it, and people lose their humanity and turn into true monsters. So it's Cropsy and Killer Legends, though I want to talk about more deeply, but it's a little bit like that, where they did Cropsy first, and that came out in 2009. It's available on Prime, Roku, Tubi, Canopy, Pluto, Plex. It's all over the place. And then 5 years later, they followed up with Killer Legends. We'll talk Cropsy first. Cropsy is basically this story, an urban legend, essentially. It's in New York. I believe it's Long Island, but there's this urban legend that there's this killer named Cropsy, and he's a child killer. He's taking children from Long Island. He's killing them. It becomes this kind of huge urban legend, and these two filmmakers who grew up in that area are making a film to kind of explore that legend a little more deeply and dive into how it came to be. And, every urban legend is based on, with some sort of truth. It comes from somewhere. And so they dive into that. They do some investigation. They do, I should say, investigative journalism. They dive into that story. They uncover some, really horrific true crimes that happened in Long Island, or was it Long Island or Staten Island? It's one of the two, but it's in New York. They uncover the crimes that happened that led to the story of Cropsy. And it's not just, one story. It's, stories about, abandoned children in mental hospitals and, satanic cults and the satanic panic that kind of all fed into this urban legend of this satanic child killer, Cropsy. So it's a really interesting dive into like that one particular urban legend, which is really cool. And I think it hits closer to home if you grew up in that area. In fact, when I posted this on my Instagram and recommended it, a lot of people who were from the area commented and said this movie creeped them out because when they were kids, they knew this legend, and to know the story behind it and that there is some truth behind some of this, like it really, really freaked them out. But I loved the approach of like, we're going to just take this urban legend and kind of strip it down, find the true story behind it, and get out there and find the truth, because there always is some truth. And then that's where their sequel, Killer Legends, 5 years later came, and they expanded on that. So now instead of just Cropsy, Killer Legends, which is Killer Legends an hour and 26 minutes, Cropsy's an hour and 24. So you can do them both in 3 hours flat. It would be a cool double feature back to back. Killer Legends is on Peacock, Roku, Hoopla, Tubi, Plex, and Freevee. So it's on some of the same services as Cropsy. Let me just do a double check there. On Tubi, you can watch them both. On Plex, you can watch them both. And on Roku, the Roku channel, you can watch them both, as well as on Freevee. So you got a couple overlap options there. And Killer Legends expands on this and takes several urban legends, not just Cropsy, but it dives into, I believe Killer Legends dives into the killer clowns. And they kind of get into, obviously, John Wayne Gacy, maybe the most famous killer clown. So they dive into all of that. But if you've seen, if you've read, well, I guess seen now because it's a movie too, but if you read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark as a kid, a lot of the urban legends, which that book is full of, that book is a lot of urban legends. There's also poetry and short stories, but there's a lot of urban legends, very popular urban legends that they put in that book. A lot of those are covered here. So the killer clown is one of them. Like there's always a killer clown. That's, Pennywise, John Wayne Gacy in real life. They dive into why that is, the fear of clowns. But there's also the babysitter and the man upstairs, which if you've seen the film, when a stranger calls, it's the whole, hey, the call's coming from inside the house. The babysitter is there alone at night, is getting the creepy phone call. And, the man has been in the house the whole time. And so it dives into that, in that legend. And, is that true? Did it ever really happen? Is there anything that was based on, which is super interesting? Then they do one that I love as a horror fan. They do the Candyman, which is that urban legend of poisoned candy on Halloween, or, the guy who puts the razor blades in the apples and gives them out to kids, of which, has there ever been anything actually proven on that? Is it an urban legend? It became a bit of a mass hysteria thing in the 80s and 90s. But I remember even growing up as a kid in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was always, you got to check your candy. You got to make sure the wrapper's not, partially torn, because people are out here injecting them with things and poisoning kids. And it's like, realistically, has there ever actually been a case of that happening? And they dive into that, and I won't spoil anything, but they get into that story and dive into it. And then they do the Hook Man, which is the man with a hook. And this is popular from I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's popular from the movie Urban Legend, if you've seen that. And it's also in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, where there's like the teenage couple and they're out at night, parked at like Lover's Lane or whatever, and the radio's on, and they say, "Oh, there's an escaped killer." And he's got a hook for a hand, and he escaped from the local, state hospital or whatever. And, then as somebody, bangs on the car or whatever, they hear something, they get out of the car, or they drive away really quickly. And when they get home, it's just the hook on the door handle. Like the Hook Man was there. It's the hook. And so what does that go back to? Where does that pull from? They explore that urban legend. They explore the true stories behind it. And it gives you some more context into a lot of these kind of things that show up over and over again. The killer clowns, the calls coming from inside of the house, the Hook Man. These things are prevalent in horror movies, and it's an extremely creepy deep dive, because they find the real life origins of all these stories. And you kind of find out, just like, I guess like an old wives' tale, an urban legend comes from some truth. People aren't just making this up. The reason it gets passed through and through, and the reason it starts to get sensationalized, is everyone's playing a game of telephone. But eventually, at some point, somebody told the story to somebody else, and it was based on a true story. And then that got relayed and relayed and relayed. And all of a sudden, the whole world's being poisoned with Halloween candy. But where did it come from? Where did it start from? It's a super, super interesting look. So if you like folk horror, folk history, American history, diving into weird urban legends and folk legends, you'll really enjoy Killer Legends. So again, Cropsy, you can watch that first. It's on Prime Video, Roku, Tubi, Canopy, Pluto, Plex, and then Killer Legends is on Peacock, Roku, Hoopla, Tubi, Plex, and Freevee. So, not all your mainstream services here, but I'm telling you, there are much better services than just your Netflix, Hulu, Disney, Max. If you can get onto Canopy with your library card, if you can get onto the Roku channel, if you get onto Tubi, Pluto TV, there's so much incredible content that isn't just the Netflix originals and the Max originals and the Hulu originals and the Disney originals and all the stuff they just want to push at you. There are some streaming services out there that are actually doing a great job curating really unique, creative selections. And Tubi, Pluto, Canopy, those are a few. So definitely go check them out. They're free to download. They're free to use. So what's to lose? So anyways, thank you guys for listening to this episode or watching. If you're on YouTube, I really appreciate it. This was a passionate topic for me that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. And it all came from this Instagram reel. I did an Instagram reel with creepy documentaries I thought everybody should watch. It was a really simple reel. It just gave some recommendations. And I believe, I'm going to pull it up right now, as of today, when I'm recording this. Now I'm recording these, a few weeks in advance of when you're actually going to see them. But that reel has 19 million views. So I knew that there was a want. And in the comments, people were saying, tell me more about these. Tell me why I should watch them. Give me more recommendations. I will throw out some honorable mentions. What Happened to Aunt Diane is an incredible one. The Keepers. Aunt Diane's on Max. The Keepers is an incredible series, which is a little bit longer, but that's on Netflix. And if I had to give one more honorable mention to a documentary that really creeped me out, I mean, anything with John Wayne Gacy or these, serial killer tapes, those are always really creepy, interesting looks into that psychology. And I don't glorify these guys by any means, but I am fascinated by what makes somebody become a serial killer. And so that inside look, while very creepy, is also fascinating to me. So there's a lot of those out there, confession tapes, and there's one with Jeffrey Dahmer, there's one with John Wayne Gacy. There's some Manson interviews. That kind of stuff is really cool too. And I shouldn't say really cool, like obviously horrible, feel for the victims. I'm more interested in why it happens, in the sort of like, how can we try to prevent that from happening in the future? The more you learn about it, the more hopefully you can diagnose and prevent. I feel very much the same way about like mass, killers right now and spree killers. And like, how can we get to know more about these people so that we can prevent this from happening? Because it's a crazy phenomenon. Why is it happening? You have to understand the psychology first. So that's where a lot of this comes. But a lot of these documentaries that I talked about today, they're twists and turns and loops, and they're all over the place, and they're going to go take you down rabbit holes you didn't expect, and they're going to have you with your jaw wide open, eyes wide open, just thinking about it for a long time. And I've been thinking about these ones for a very long time since I watched them, and I'm so glad I could just get it out there and tell you guys all about them. So in the show notes, in the show description, and in the video description, I'll put links to where you can get all of these, but also justwatch.com, a great resource to figure out where stuff is streaming. They tend to update things pretty often. Who Took Johnny is really the only one I think you'll have a hard time finding, but hopefully there's like a YouTube rip or something out there you can watch. So thank you all for listening and for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more from me and from the podcast, please subscribe on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, follow along. If you're on Spotify, Apple, whatever you're on, appreciate the support. Hope you guys have been enjoying the show so far. Much more to come. Many more cool topics. Could be individual movies, could be stuff like this. And once again, thank you to our sponsor, Hamilton Book, who sponsored the first 5 episodes of this podcast. Really helped me get this thing off the ground and pay for some of those things like logos and editing and intro and outros that were done. Like, huge thanks to HamiltonBook.com. So please go check them out and support all the sponsors throughout the episodes, because they help me keep this thing going and help keep the proverbial light on here. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Seriously, stay safe. After you watch these, stay safe. There's some really fucked up people in the world. So stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you guys all soon. Hey there, movie buff. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of House of 1,000 Movies. I hope you had as much fun listening as I did discussing some of my favorite films. Don't forget, if you're into video podcasts, you can head over to the YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button. If you're already on YouTube, it's right there, so why not hit it? And for our audio listeners, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. If you've been enjoying the show, why not show me some love by leaving a 5-star review? It really helps me out, and it lets me know that I'm hitting the mark. And hey, before you go, a quick shout out to our sponsors. By supporting them, you're not just supporting the show, but also the content you love. Thanks again for joining me in the House of 1,000 Movies. Until next time, keep watching, keep listening, and keep watching great movies. Take care, everyone.